guys, my name is Jericho and this is my first YouTube video. I have no idea what I'm doing and trust me, it'll show. Today we'll be talking about everybody's favorite game to hate at the moment, Diablo 4. Now, specifically we'll be taking a look at Lilith, the pinnacle boss, the hardest boss in the game from the perspective of a rogue, and how the new seasonal mechanics of the first season actually influenced that. Now, I know there's a lot of content already out there on Diablo 4 and Lilith specifically from a bunch of very talented and dedicated ARPG veterans. In fact, the entire premise of this build is based off a pre-season rogue build made by YouTuber Lucky Luciano, links in the description below. Myself, I've played an unhealthy amount of video games, specifically MMOs, but in terms of ARPGs, I did play Diablo 2 back in the day, but I was a kid so that doesn't really count. And I did play a relatively negligible amount of D3 on launch. I took Diablo 4 a bit more seriously, and I played the beta and the server slam, tried out all the classes, decided I would make a rapid-fire rogue build blind without looking up guides, and try to understand the game as I go along. I was aware it wasn't the fastest leveling build, but I really enjoyed it. I leveled to 100 in just over a week and decided to take on Lilith. After bashing my head against the wall for 30 to 40 hours total without being able to consistently get past the first part of Phase 2, I gave in and I looked up a guide and came across the Poison Stagger build I mentioned before from Lucky Luciano. Most of my gear was pretty bad for a melee poison build, and I had to level some of the glyphs I had neglected to work better with it, so the damage check was pretty tight and it took a good few attempts to finally down her, and this was using some of the rarer, hard to find drop-only elixirs in the game. This build basically breaks the boss and lets you bypass all the mechanics, but it did require a significant gear and Paragon optimization to meet the damage check during the stagger window, and you do need some practice to time the stagger window. Now, what I realized while going through the new season mechanics is that some of the new hearts introduced in Season 1 that function basically as gems for your jewelry actually give you significantly more leeway in terms of stagger and damage for the fight. So I'm going through my gear, abilities, and Paragon tree here, and as you can see, it isn't the best it could be. Stats aren't all great. I'm not using the most effective glyphs since I don't have them leveled up. The ones I am using are now level 21. I'm missing 8 Paragon points since I'm level 98. I'm not using elixirs, and it all turns out just fine, to be honest. I will be including a link to a max roll build for this setup. Well, the Paragon is not necessarily perfectly set up, but it allows for a relatively cheap and fast switch to a Shadowfrost CC build I am working on for clearing higher nightmare dungeons. You can get a full breakdown of how the pre-season build works in Lucky Luciano's video, but what I would like to highlight is how the seasonal hearts influence the fight. I am using the Cage Heart of Creeping Death that gives you a massive up to 150% multiplicative poison damage on staggered bosses. Yes, that's right, your poisons do 2.5 times more damage during the stagger window. The Caged Heart of Cluster Munitions that gives you a lucky hit chance to launch 5 stun grenades that add stagger. The Caged Heart of Clipshot makes your Twisting Blade slow and your Puncture knockback, so again adds stagger for free while just doing your rotation. And by the way, this can lead to some hilarious situations in case you do get an ad phase during Phase 1. So here's the encounter, 98 Rogue versus Lilith. The main benefit from the hearts is that you get so many sources of stagger that you don't have to hold back anymore and can pop poison imbuement on the pole, burst down the boss, and the stagger window will line up nicely, and that's when your Creeping Heart of Death kicks in and just melts the boss in one stagger and he phases her. And that's it for Phase 1. Now, the most important part for Phase 2 is to stagger her immediately when she spawns. That way she won't create the initial 4 blood boils and the rest of the fight is basically trivialized. Her stagger bar fills up really fast in Phase 2, so that shouldn't really be a problem with the hearts, and as you can see I have no cooldown reduction, so I only put down 2 traps before she spawns. But if you're still having problems, you can switch over the exposure key passive for the second phase for some extra stagger. So you immediately shadow step onto her, do rotation. As you can see, she staggers almost immediately. You will not be able to burn her down in one stagger window, but since the boils didn't spawn, the rest of the fight should be easy. She moves over here. You can stagger her one more time here. Basically gets her to 1% or 5% health, and at that point she won't go down anymore, but you're done. Now, if you do stagger her at different points, you might get some random mechanics spawning up just from the boss bugging out completely. Just try to do those initial 2 staggers there and get her down to 0 effectively. And then just build up stagger, but don't actually stagger her for a 3rd time until the very end of the encounter. And that's pretty much it. As you can see, just running around to the places where she's gonna go scripted. You want her stagger bar to be almost full here, so that you can lay down a trap on the final platform and just shadow step to her and stagger her immediately. And that's it. Once this stagger window is done, she will be dead and you'll have your mount. And that's the encounter with the Season 1 mechanics. I guess the point of the video is that the new Season Hearts really do open up a lot of new options in approaching this fight, and although this build and many others do rely on some questionably functioning mechanics, looking at you bursting venoms, the damage and stagger checks are so much easier to obtain now than in preseason that if you compare the gear aspects and glyphs I was using to the ones in the planner, you really do see how much more room for improvement there really is. Now, I have a long way to go in terms of editing skills and planning, but I've been using perfectionism as an excuse to delay getting started for the better part of the last year, so I figured I would make this one the best I can and then improve along the way. I plan on creating more content for RPGs and MMOs in the future, as well as streaming over on Twitch if you'd like to join me there. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, go ahead and give it a like and subscribe for more content in the future. And on that note, I will leave you a clip that shows why you should have a backup to switch from whatever jewelry you have your clip shot hard in case you do get an ad phase during phase 1. Boink. 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 As you can see, clip shot gets you good stagger, but you really don't want the knockback on the puncture if you do get the ads there. Alright. Boink. Alright, that's enough of that. Have a nice day.